Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Chapters here on Armstrong Television. This is a great show for me anyway, and I hope it is for you because it gives me the opportunity to invite editors, authors, publishers, all sorts of people in the writing world to come and chat with me. And I'm happy today to invite and welcome my friend Valerie Nieman to talk to me. Val, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Carter. Great to see you again.
She's got a new novel. It's called In the Lonely Backwater, and it's set in rural North Carolina. It's being called not only a page-turning thriller, but also a complex psychological portrait of a young woman dealing with guilt, betrayal, and secrecy. That's a lot for a kid to carry. To the Bones, an earlier novel, is a folk horror mystery set in coal country, and it was a finalist for the 2020 Manly Wade Wellman Award, and it joins 3 earlier novels. She's also published a short fiction collection and 3 poetry books, the most recent being Leopard Lady, A Life in Verse. She's a graduate of West Virginia University and Queen's University of Charlotte, has held state and NEA fellowships, and is a professor emeritus of creative writing at North Carolina A&T State University. It's so nice to have you. I think the last time you were here, Elliot Parker was probably still the host, so that's a few years ago.
It was his last show.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, so it's my honor now to chat with you. This book I loved. I have to tell you that. It was just wonderful. I loved the characters, especially the ending, which I'm not going to give away, okay? But it's complex, it's compelling, and it's exciting. It's a thriller in a lot of ways. It's a mystery for sure. I was going to read the synopsis, but I'd rather you tell us a little bit about the book. What's going on here?
Well, Maggie is a 17-year-old young woman, and she's gender non-performing. She's not really sure. She talks about herself a lot in terms of animals. She's not sure what she is. She feels more male in many ways. She's a tomboy, and she's out in the woods, and she sails her boat. But she's just very insecure and very, very smart. She's planning to be a scientist. And so she has, a big plate full. Her mother, beautiful, beauty queen kind of person, took off, left the family, and her father just dissolved into drink. Can't deal with it. So Maggie has been picking up the pieces ever since, running the marina, taking care of everything from deliveries to moving boats. And so she's really struggling to do that, plus finish school, and deal with her own personal problems, which include an ongoing battle with her cousin Charisse, who's kind of a younger copy of her mother. Beautiful, popular, all those things.
The things that Maggie thinks she is not.
Right. And she and Charisse get into an argument, and it escalates to online fights and physical fights in school. The night of prom, Charisse visits Maggie and her friends in the graveyard where they're hanging out. These kids wouldn't be going to prom. And a storm comes in, and everybody splits, and Charisse follows Maggie. So Maggie was the last person to see her alive because she disappears, and 2 days later she's found dead on a boat in the marina. And so from there, it's a mystery about who killed Charisse.
Absolutely.
And also it's the mystery of Maggie trying to solve herself.
That's great. It really is a wonderful book. I'm always curious about what inspires other authors' books. Where did you come up with the character of Maggie? What is it, Warhauser?
Warhauser.
Warhauser.
One thing I do is look for names in old graveyards and phone books to find people, who fit an area. And so a lot of the names are names that are sort of eastern North Carolina.
Oh.
Not so much her. She's from North Carolina. That name came from central West Virginia. But the other names down there, the Alfords and people like that, were early settlers in North Carolina. Anyway, Maggie is a lot of me. And I am a lot of Maggie. I was a solitary girl wandering in the woods. My parents indulged me that, I would pack a sandwich and go off when I was barely old enough to, be out there and just spend the day picking up things, looking at things, investigating things. And so I'm very much like her with that. Other things, not so much. So that was one thread. Another thread was the sailing, which I did for some time at the lake that is roughly the one in this book. My years as a police reporter figured into it with the mystery, the
Sure.
detective, all of that. And the final piece that brought all of those together, because I sort of had those pieces working, they were sort of out there. And I found a high school yearbook. And in that high school yearbook, a classmate had written across her picture in the way that people do, don't do anything I wouldn't do, you know how it is.
Yeah, right.
And here was this inscription, roughly, I hope we can get together and talk this out sometime, something like that. So there was a problem.
Yeah.
And then she had signed it love. I didn't remember anything about it. What did we fight about that was important enough to put in the yearbook? And that got me thinking about those high school battles, rivalries, misunderstandings.
The jealousies.
The jealousies. And so from there, it just sort of, the other things clicked into place and it came together.
That's wonderful. That's exciting. I like that kind of thing. I have to say that I am struck by not the storyline itself, but the character and the setting with where the crawdads sing. It's, it's so similar in some ways. It's a girl who's interested in science of some sort. I think your book is far more believable. To me, there's a lot about crawdads that's, you have to suspend your disbelief.
Kind of a fairy tale.
Yeah, a little bit. But do you ever have people say that to you, and does it bother you, or would you like to not be associated with that book?
Well, I wish it had been published when I was sending it around. Yes, I hear it all the time, and I think it's in one of the blurbs that's in the front of the book. Ashley Warlick, who's a writer and bookseller, said it's a richer, darker, twistier.
There you go.
Crawdads. The funny thing is, I started writing this really about 2007. I was sailing at a marina, and so I was journaling, which I'm not a big journaler, but I was keeping notes on stuff. When things bloomed, when I saw butterflies, things that happened in the marina, storms, things like that. I was just writing all of this stuff down. I guess because I knew it was ending. I was starting to get some problems with arthritis. My thumbs went first, and I thought, oh, you're just pulling the lines too hard, sheets. But that wasn't it. And so I think I was trying to capture everything. I worked on the book on a regular basis until I finally got it, I thought, done about 2012. I found an agent. I found actually 2 agents. The first one kind of left on me, but I was very happy with the second one. She was with a very impressive agency. Actually, Stephen King's agency. I thought, oh, I've made it. I've really, I've got this,
Right.
Important agency. So she sent it around to some young adult publishers, and that's been an ongoing battle. I said, it's not young adult. And she said, yes, it is. I said, no, it's not. She sent it to young adult publishers. It didn't hit. And then things happened, and she ended up leaving the business. And I took the book back and kind of nursed my wounds for a bit. And then I did what a writer should do. I went back into it and started trying to make it better, revising it, going deeper into the characters. I didn't add any characters, but a couple of them weren't pulled up enough. They didn't have enough definition. And so I worked at it and submitted it. And finally, it was again done, I thought, about 2019. And I sent it to Regal House, and they took it on, but their publication calendar is, a couple of years. So it came out earlier this year. So while all of the crawdad stuff blew up, my book had been available.
Yeah.
Hey, all of you big publishers, it was available. You could have beat out
could have had this one,
crawdads. You could have had this one. But I do hear it all the time. And
right.
it's a little uncomfortable because I think people think, oh, well, you just copied
Yes,
that.
right.
And in
Well,
fact,
that's why I wanted to be sure and bring up that you had started it and wrten it and had it finished before.
and it was in New
Crawdads.
York. It was in front of the
Right.
7 major publishers.
Right.
At that time, there were still 7 at that point in 2012.
Now, that brings me to another question. You said it took you years to write it. I think that's sometimes surprising to readers because there are so many people like Stephen King maybe and John Grisham, for instance, who just crank out books, one after another. I think people are amazed that it does take that long to write a book. Do you
Indeed.
agree?
Well, people are different. There are people who are just able, and it also helps if you're, famous like
And
Stephen
have a
King.
contract and
And you have lots of assistants who can look up things for you and who can bring you food and who can, yeah, I mean, you're already very productive, but you needn't worry about those sorts of things. Everybody's different. Mm-hmm. Most of my books take 5 or 10 years to come to fruition. I have to think my way through them because not one book is connected to the other. I mean, I think people who write series books, you've got
right,
a character and you
right.
just put them in a new situation. These are all wildly different. And so I have to think my way through the process and try to figure it out. All of my books have taken a long time. To the Bones was the shortest. It actually took me 9 months.
Wow.
I sat down and said, I am going to try to write a book and not dawdle. And the thing is, I had it all in my head. I mean, I'm
Mm-hmm.
deep in West Virginia. I wasn't born here, but many, many years as a farmer and newspaper reporter. And so all of that stuff went into that book. And it was all, what do they say now, top of mind? It was all there. It just came so easily. And so that one came very rapidly. I actually wrote it and published it while I was trying to market Backwater.
Yeah.
So that one was short. On the other hand, I'm working on a book which is now in its 3rd decade of working on it.
Third decade.
Yes, and I was talking with a couple of friends that are reading the other night, and they both have taken 30 years to write a book. And they're wonderful books, but sometimes it just takes you a long time to bring it to fruition. And so we actually talked about doing a panel on that, when your book takes a lifetime.
Yeah.
Compared to some people who, have turned them out every 3 months.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was looking at some journals of mine. I am a journaler, or was, and I realized that it has taken me a long time to get books, longer than I remembered, to get a book out, because I'm making notes about it and I'm thinking about it, asking myself questions about it the whole time,
And
that life is going on.
Yeah. And what's the starting point? With Backwater, I can say when I found that inscription, but actually there had been so much stuff accumulating before that. My work as a reporter, my time as a child. I mean, how far back do you go to say the start of a book?
Right. All right, tell me 2 things. One is, in that case, would ask, what is your process? Do you get a gem of an idea? Do you then do research and then write, or do you start in writing and have to do research as you go through it? Or does it depend on the book?
It's usually the voice. When the voice starts, with Maggie, I found that inscription, I kind of pondered it, and I had fragments, as I said, and when I sat down, the first line is just her, actually not the very first line, the first line of chapter 2, she just started talking about her and Charisse. The problems between them and who they were and how she views herself, which is very negative. And at that point, I just had to hang on. But the funny thing is that the first line of the book was the last line I wrote. In the last revision, I had always started with Maggie talking about Charisse. And when I finished the book, the last line about this is how I remembered it, I thought, actually, the book is so much about memory and reality and how we shape a world we can live in. And so I said, that's also the opening. And it's slightly different from the opening to the end, but that was the last line I wrote.
Oh, that's fascinating. All right, tell us a little bit about To the Bones.
To the Bones came out in 2019 from West Virginia University Press. And that started when I was struggling still with writing, revising, submitting in the Lonely Backwater. And so I kind of set myself this idea to write a pretty much genre-oriented book pretty quickly. And I was complaining. I was like, I can't get started. I don't know. I had some false starts, and I was complaining to a friend, and I always said when I had my farm in West Virginia, if I was going to kill somebody, I'd throw them down a mine crack. Not on my farm. I had a mine crack, but on somebody else's farm. And he said, well, do it. And so I sort of sat back and said, oh. So I threw a guy down a mine crack, and he didn't die. And so why is he down there? Who did it? Why?
Right,
How does he get out? Where does it go from there?
right, yeah. All right, let's go back to Maggie just a minute. That's a teenage voice, and you've written it in first person.
Yes.
How did you get the sense of how a teenager would use today's language and slang? Did you rely on people that you knew who maybe had kids, or did you sit in coffee shops and listen to them?
Well, at the time, I was teaching at A&T.
Okay.
So I had students who were just a little bit older
Right.
than Maggie. And yeah, I would listen to them. I would see how they wrote things. They were primarily African American, so there were some differences, but mostly commonalities. Mostly about how you look at the world and how you put yourself in it when you're still forming yourself. And I also remembered how I was. And she's very sarcastic. I was not. I wouldn't have dared. But in her mind, she says things that I would have never said. But in her mind, she's very sarcastic about everything. She's cynical about the
Yes,
world
she is.
for a lot of reasons.
Right.
And she would
She's
just
got
say
good
it.
reason to be.
Yeah, and she would just say these things. Like one of the first things she says is, it's not like Charisse was an idiot flag girl. I mean, she's really brutal about her classmates, her family. So that was specifically Maggie, that snarkiness, her trying to push off the world that's been unkind to her. But I tried to avoid the latest thing. For one thing, she's living in rural North Carolina, and she's out at this marina, and she doesn't care about the latest
Fad or the
fad.
latest.
Yeah, she has no interest whatsoever. And the other thing is, it's roughly a few years back. It's back when young people would have still been using Facebook compared to today. And then when things fall apart for her, she gets off messaging and things like that. But we haven't come to the TikTok era.
Right.
But she kind of divorces herself from social media because that's where she gets bullied, and that's where things kind of blow up because she makes up stories and puts them on there.
You've also written a number of poems and books of collected poems. Which do you prefer, poetry or prose? Or do you have a preference? And does it matter? Does it come to you as to what form your story has to be in?
It does come. It kind of tells me, what do I want to be? Very seldom. I think I've had two occasions where something was a poem that became a story or vice versa. I did have my most recent book, Leopard Lady, lyric and narrative poems that actually formed a novel, a story arc. So that was really different in how that went together. And that was very voice driven. That was, Dinah started to talk to me one night. And so that voice, which was completely unlike Maggie, who was familiar. It's like, oh yeah, I kind of know Maggie, but not Dinah. Dinah was completely, I have no idea where she came from. Never worked in a carnival, didn't know anyone who worked in a carnival. So I had to do a lot of research for that. But the feeling and the emotions were all there. So right now, I'm trying to put together my fourth collection of poetry. I've been writing and accumulating. Unlike Leopard Lady, though, there's not an arc and a shape. It's just poems, but so I'm trying to find a shape. And you put them all out and look at them, sort of think, well, what do I have?
Right.
And then you
Which way
start
is it gonna
shoveling.
go? Right.
Not shuffling. Sometimes you should shovel. But basically shuffling. Let's get our words right. Until it seems to fall into place. So I'm at that point, and I need to write a few more poems, I think, because I'll throw some out. And yeah.
Are you still teaching?
No, I retired last year. So I kind of had these places in my life. I was a journalist in West Virginia for about 25 years, and then I went to North Carolina, and I was a journalist, solely a journalist for 5 or 6 years. Then I went back and got my MFA and was both teaching and working at the newspaper. That was a nightmare because I was half-time of each, which meant I was 3/4 time at each, because both are very demanding.
Sure.
And then I was able to transfer into a tenure track line and spent the end of my career at A&T teaching creative writing, humanities, some journalism, mostly creative writing. Really loved it.
Sometimes when I'm working on a book, I don't want to read other fiction. For the fear maybe that it'll somehow influence me. Do you read even when you're working on a book of your own?
I do, often not, and I probably wouldn't read mysteries while I was writing a
Right,
mystery.
so some other genre.
So, yeah, some other genre or nonfiction or poetry.
Yeah.
I read a lot of magazine fiction and poetry books. Not as many novels. I'm working on a novel because it's taken a lot of
Yeah.
time and attention. And things go in waves. It's funny. I hadn't been writing much poetry. I've been going through all of the book tour stuff and I'm working on a sequel to the Bones. And I, hope WV Press might decide to take it, but I don't know yet, but I'm about almost halfway through it. And so it's taking a lot longer than the original, has a lot more research in it because I'm taking the thing to Ireland, so I have to do more research.
Yeah.
And it would be really great if I could go back, like, no, if I get some nice money, I will do that. But I was there for a while and was able to do a lot of sort of looking around and gathering string, as we would say in the journalistic profession. But I wasn't writing much poetry. And just in the last day or two, and I got this journal, which I hadn't been using at all. And I opened it up and I started putting stuff in. And then another thing came, and then another thing came. And so I'm just right now jotting notes because I've been doing a lot of book touring for Backwater, but it's like, get the ideas down, it'll come back. But if you don't get them down,
Yes,
they're
right.
gone.
You'll lose
so,
it.
at least I get the rough down.
Right. What are you reading right now?
I am in between books. I just finished reading, my friend Grace Marcus wrote a book called Visible Signs, which was set in the 60s, and so I was reading that and rereading it to introduce her at various events. It came out in May, shortly after my book, so we've been trying to cooperate. I just finished a couple of books by Regal House authors, Michael Bourne and Frank Morelli, and I'm getting ready to start another one by Judith Turner Yamamoto, and she had a reading the other night. So I'm reading a lot of Regal House writers because we're doing things like podcasts and interviews and just, reading, signings. So I'm trying to get to know their work so that I can, be sensible when I'm talking about
Yeah.
things. So I've been reading a lot of those. I just finished reading, or I haven't finished reading, I'm still in it, a book called Across the Great Lake by Lee Zacharias, which is just a really interesting book. And I wish it came out right at the beginning of the pandemic, like To the Bones. And it went on my shelf and I didn't get to it. And I should have gotten to it earlier because it has a female narrator. And her mother falls ill after losing a child, and this is in the 30s. Her father's a captain of a Great Lakes freighter, so he's got no choice. He puts her on the boat, and they go
Wow.
out across the Great Lake in the middle of winter with bad weather. And so it's her memories of being a 5-year-old girl
Oh, my
on a ship
goodness.
of men in peril.
Wow, yeah.
And so it's very powerful, and I'm not done yet, but I thought, her and Maggie, they could have had such interesting conversations.
Exactly, right. Do you miss Maggie?
Oh, she's always there.
Oh, okay.
Your characters, they never go away. And once I finish the To the Bone sequel, I may find my way back to Maggie, and I've thought a bit about her a little older, and Drexel Van the detective re-encountering,
I see.
because he leaves the book with saying, I'll be
Yeah.
looking out for you.
Watching out for you, you're right.
Yeah, in a way that's both protective and just a little bit menacing.
Yeah, a little creepy.
Yeah, so
Right.
the role, the relationship between the two of them is so interesting. I would like to put them back
Yeah.
in touch, but I haven't come up with an incident or a case that would do that. So I've got to.
I want to read the last paragraph of your book. I love the way you've ended this, because I think it not only is Maggie, it's all of us. Writers, we steal lives to shape a world one we are able to live in for a while. Here at college, I'm learning to fictionalize for a living as I once fictionalized to protect my life. That's how I remembered it. I think that's a brilliant ending, and I know you used something similar to that. That's how I remembered it in the beginning of the book. So you have left it so that we could encounter Maggie again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
like
she
that.
has some changes in the book. She was going to be a scientist, and things changed along
Yeah,
the
now
way.
she
And
wants to be a writer, and
she's digging into herself.
Yeah.
She's still trying to figure out who she is.
right. So I assume all of your books are available in the usual places, Barnes and Noble, Amazon, book tenders in Barboursville for those of us local, bookshop.org, other bookstores,
Also,
independent bookstores.
Also, here at the Red Caboose in
Right,
Huntington,
good. Yes.
signed copies of 4 or 5 of my books here at Red Caboose at Heritage Station. And book tenders, I'll be seeing them tomorrow. We're going to have a little author chat mini workshop.
Right.
And other places around, mostly in North Carolina. Where else? I'm in Ohio, Beaver Creek, Ohio, Barnes and Noble. There are some signed copies there. So I've sort of
That's
been
great.
wandering around and
That's great.
hope to be in some other places in West Virginia. But it's been a little strange doing a book tour after COVID. People are having a hard time getting
Yeah.
back up to speed. So, I
Right.
hope to be visiting with people soon.
Good. Well, folks, this is one book you do not want to pass up. It is really good. It's called In the Lonely Backwater. Valerie, thank you so much for coming with us today. I appreciate it so much. And thanks to you all for watching, and tune in again the next time.
Connect with Chapters through email. Write to lp4@zoominternet.net. Chapters has a Facebook page at Armstrong Chapters. Like, subscribe, share, and comment. All Chapters episodes are available on YouTube. Visit the Armstrong Neighborhood channel on YouTube and look for a playlist of all the Chapters programs.